Establishment, we're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently. Don't
miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hello and welcome to On the Money. Yes, it's me, Mark Longhurst, in for Liam once more. And as ever, we are focused on the UK's cost of living crisis, helping you to beat the squeeze. And today we're urging everyone, don't panic. Why? Because both Gordon Brown and Liz Truss are now saying that we need an emergency budget. The National Grid is wargaming for energy rationing. And as the hosepipe bans bite, the streets of North London are awash with leaking mains water, 4 feet deep. Well, we've got the experts here to keep you afloat as we man the lifeboats. But first, the GB News headlines with Rosie.
Good afternoon, it's 1 o'clock. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date today on GB News. 3 people have been taken to hospital following a suspected gas explosion in South London. The terrace house collapsed after the blast and neighbouring properties were damaged. A 4th person was treated at the scene. Neighbours said they helped rescue 3 children from the rubble, but they fear a 4th child may still be trapped. Downing Street's rejected a call by the former Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, to hold a COBRA meeting to address the cost of living. Boris Johnson's spokesman said the Prime Minister will be speaking to the Chancellor to ensure planned support measures remain on track. Well, the spokesperson added that further plans are a matter for the next Prime Minister. How to manage the crisis has been at the centre of the leadership race. Liz Truss wants immediate tax cuts and an emergency budget next month so that the national insurance hike can be scrapped. Supporter of Liz Truss and former Northern Ireland Secretary Brandon Lewis argues that tax cuts and inflation management aren't mutually exclusive.
What we want to do and what Liz Truss wants to do is get on top of and deal with the challenges that we're seeing with inflation, get inflation under control, but also be putting more money in people's pockets. Some people are arguing that you can do one or the other. It's just not the case. Actually, you can look at how you deal with inflation whilst also keeping a low tax economy.
Rishi Sunak has a different strategy. The former Culture Secretary and Sunak supporter Oliver Dowden told us that dealing with inflation should take priority over tax cuts.
The first thing we've got to do is crush this scourge of inflation. That is at the root cause of all of this. And that's why, for example, Rishi was endorsed just last week by Nigel Lawson, one of the best chancellors we've ever had, who served under Margaret Thatcher, who understands the need to crush inflation first because it makes everyone poorer, and then to cut people's taxes for the long term.
Shadow Armed Forces Minister Luke Pollard told us that the Conservative government needs to act now to support vulnerable people.
There are already families struggling right now, already pensioners struggling right now. And if we don't see bolder measures taken now, not waiting until the autumn, then I fear we're going to see an increase in deprivation, increase in hunger, and more people turning off their heating in the winter months, which we know will only lead to more health problems and further pressure on an NHS that's already in crisis.
In some other news now, the Met Police strip-searched 650 young people over a 2-year period. In a quarter of those cases, it was without an appropriate adult present. The figure's been condemned by children's charities. Well, the Children's Commissioner asked for the information after a 15-year-old schoolgirl who was on her period was strip-searched after being wrongly suspected of carrying cannabis. Scotland Yard data shows the hundreds of cases between 2018 and 2020, more than 95% of those who were stripped were boys. Former Met Superintendent Leroy Logan told us that toxic police culture led to this behaviour.
It seems like there's a culture of fear that even though good cops don't call out the bad cops, so carrying out their powers inappropriately and sometimes breaching the code of conduct. And that toxicity of it is creating so much trauma on the wider public, in particular young people.
Former Manchester United footballer Ryan Giggs is facing trial, accused of assaulting and controlling his ex-girlfriend. The 48-year-old was surrounded by photographers as he arrived at court. It's alleged he used controlling and coercive behaviour against Kate Greville between August 2017 and November of 2020. He's also charged with assaulting her younger sister, Emma Greville. He's pleaded not guilty to all charges. Flooding's closed roads in North London after a water main burst. 10 fire engines and around 70 firefighters are on the scene in Islington to manage the situation. A nearby leisure centre is flooded and several streets are under 4 feet of water. Thames Water has apologised to customers as some have no water or low pressure as a result. Well, there's increasing pressure on the water companies to act quickly after water mains burst. Several companies have imposed temporary hosepipe bans as the Met Office predicts another heatwave will start this week with a prolonged period of dry weather. This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to On the Money.
Rosie, thanks very much indeed. Now, this cost of living crisis is a national emergency, or so says the former Labour Chancellor and Prime Minister Gordon Brown. But with people turning back to cash as prices rise, according to the Post Office, and a 1970s blackout potentially on the cards, according to the National Grid, well, he might just have a point. Plus, parts of North London, as we've just seen, currently under now 4 feet of water, with burst water pipes causing chaos. Off the back, of course, the droughts and hosepipe bans across the UK. How can we get things back on track? And each day, don't forget, On the Money features an in-depth Money Talks interview. Today, we're hearing from Sandbox VR. Now, the UK franchisee has one of the world's leading virtual reality companies, no less. That's coming up later in the show. So stay with us. This is GB News. I'm Mark Longhurst, and yes, you're on the money. So, it may well be time to put on the tin hat. News that the National Grid is about to start wargaming energy shortages have brought some don't panic exhortations from both the Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak camps in the Tory leadership campaign. But a rather more seasoned political campaigner, Gordon Brown, has now fired off a Captain Mannering demand for a full emergency budget to defuse what he described as a financial time bomb about to go off this autumn. Well, that October rise in the energy price cap and the likelihood of a more aggressive squeeze on gas supplies by Vladimir Putin has spurred the National Grid to dust off critical stress tests to see if Britain can keep the home fires burning this winter, or at least keep a odd 40-watt light bulb going. Well, it's something that the gatekeepers of such critical infrastructure do every year ahead of the colder mornings and darker evenings. But this year, they realise they are playing the game for real. The National Grid is talking to industry about how the shutdown of factories could be organised safely if supplies start running low. That exercise next month will also simulate a crisis over 4 days to work out how you would cope with energy rationing. There's even a scheme where homes and factories could be paid for switching off the gas and electricity when needed. It's another dark echo of the 1970s when the global oil crisis and a looming miners' strike led to Edward Heath's Conservative government imposing, yes, the 3-day working week, limiting electricity supplies. Television channels were forced to stop broadcasting at 10:30 each night. No bad thing, some viewers reflected. And overnight, candles and torch batteries became valuable commodities. So, are the lamps about to go out all over Britain once more? It seems incredible, doesn't it, that we are facing such a predicament in the 21st century, although, of course, we are not alone. Germany also seriously preparing for possible rationing, although they are hugely more reliant on Russian gas supplies than we are. But let's not be too smug about that. We had a huge gas storage facility at our disposal to hedge against such supply interruptions, but it was closed in 2017 when Theresa May's government told Centrica it was too expensive to support and there was enough diversity of supply anyway for it not to be needed. Whoops. So, how to defuse that time bomb still ticking away? The latest estimate from analyst Auxilione setting October's price cap now at £3,687 and £4,400 perhaps in January. Well, currently households can expect a £400 discount on the bills with £1,200 available in support for the most vulnerable. But is there any more ammunition being brought up to defeat Putin's energy squeeze? Liz Truss, once perhaps rather uncharitably described by Boris Johnson as the human hand grenade, but this time it seems that approach may have exploded rather prematurely in a friendly fire incident. No more handouts, she declared in her steely-eyed interview with the Financial Times at the weekend. Tax cuts, the only way ahead. Just a day later, Penny Mordaunt, now a trusted lieutenant, tried to defuse the situation by saying what Truss had said had been over-interpreted, whatever that is, and she in fact wasn't ruling out further help for struggling families. Out on the left flank, Sergeant Rishi Sunak firing off, it was simply wrong to rule out more cost-of-living payments, without actually again saying what he would be aiming for, apart from a temporary cut in VAT on domestic fuel. He also observed that the Tories can, quote, kiss goodbye to the next general election if they can't get inflation under control. Something Gordon Brown has already concluded, noting both Prime Minister and Chancellor are still absent on parade, on holiday. Meanwhile, back on the front line, a campaign urging energy customers to cancel their direct debits is seeing support doubling every week. Don't Pay UK, currently saying more than 91,000 very conscientious objectors have already said they'll halt their payments on October 1st. Don't panic. I wouldn't bet on it. Golly gosh. Well, we're joined now by Helen Thomas, former advisor to George Osborne and founder of Blonde Money, and Louise Oliver, financial advisor at Piercefield Oliver. And on the line, we're also joined by Garrett Cassidy, financial expert and vice president at Money's, the mobile money app. Thank you to all of you. First, let me address this call, Helen, for an emergency budget. If you were still with George Osborne, would you go for an emergency budget, and what on earth do you do in that budget?
First of all, yes, there clearly needs to be a new budget, and the leadership candidates have said there will be. I think, in fact, calling it an emergency budget isn't quite right. This is an ongoing, rolling issue. It's actually something this programme has been talking about for well over a year. So really, I think that, talk of it being an emergency, I mean, I understand why Gordon Brown's using these words. He's just trying to get things going, trying to get people doing
he's saying it should
something.
be a COBRA meeting each day as well.
He is, but what we really should be looking at is what does the economy going to look like for this next couple of years? Because this isn't just a few months of a problem. This is ongoing.
Bank of England is saying a recession for at least a year.
And, well, yes, although as one of the leadership candidates, Liz Truss, I think she said it doesn't need to be inevitable. They can, and this is where you come to your point. What do they do? And the thing is, well, we don't really have time for me to roll it all off for you. But actually, the key point is there is much that can be done. And I would fully expect whoever wins this leadership contest will be doing it. Right, OK,
Louise, big question for a financial expert. Where does the money come from? Because clearly this is the argument. Do you tax more? Do you tax less and allow the economy to grow? Do you borrow? What do you do in terms of filling this hole?
OK, well, I think that we should allow the economy to grow. I think we can grow our way out of this. And Liz Truss is very much behind business. So the corporation tax hike next year of 6% will stifle growth.
Which is a business tax, a tax on profits.
And it comes in at 50,000 profit, and it's tapered. It's only a little taper. It's hardly worth having, really. Marginal relief up to 250,000. Now, if you tax business to that extent, they may lay people off. Watch the unemployment figures.
Which are still OK at the moment.
They're good at the minute. Andrew Bailey did allude to the fact, that he thought that might, unemployment might well increase. So for me, by reducing taxes and allowing our businesses to grow, allowing them to employ staff and pay more taxes as a result, that's where we will get funds from in order to support
that
this.
is a sort of medium term to long term in terms of getting the wheels going again. In the short term, clearly Gordon Brown and others are saying we need an immediate plan to get money to people to pay these energy bills. Would you borrow?
I think that there is money available for us to do this. We had the tax receipts were more than expected over the last year, to the tune of about 12 billion. This NIC increase has been brought in for the NHS waiting list and also the social care reform. I think that
national insurance payment.
Yeah, the national insurance increase. So I think actually that should be immediately cancelled, and that will help people. It will help employers, and it will help individuals with their pay. They will get a hike in that.
Even though we're hearing the NHS is in dire straits and needs more money as well.
Yeah, there are funds to fund that.
Right.
Other than the NIC increase. So I think that's an immediate thing that we need to do to help people now.
Let's bring Garrett in, who's joining us on the line as well, with Moniz, the mobile money app. Because the other aspect we're hearing today, Garrett, and welcome to you, is that the post office is saying everyone's gone back to cash. They don't want these smart cards. They're actually depositing and taking out cash, I think, record levels and double what was being seen last year. Cash is still king.
Yeah, I mean, cash has not gone away. And I think what we're seeing in the cost of living crisis is people going back to basics. They're very much going back to the basics of being forced to really count the pennies and the pounds. And that cash can help for that. So people are using what traditionally would have been called jam jarring. So they are literally setting budgets, putting jars together and working out how much money do they have for food, how much they have for petrol, how much they have for electricity, and do they have anything left? It is a bit of a back to basics, but also highlights that no matter what we think, cash is still important.
But you share the post office analysis that this does mean people are literally having to watch the pennies then?
Yeah, no, people are having to watch the pennies. And I mean, there are digital alternatives now to do it, but, it does highlight why that kind of cash piece is important. The downside, obviously, for a lot of people is paying in cash can be more expensive. So we do need to be careful of that. We need to make sure people have those options to make sure they're on direct debit plans, etc., and that, they can manage this kind of really careful budgeting digitally as well as with cash.
Right, OK. Helen, in terms of the Osborne approach, which certainly Gordon Brown was not a fan of, austerity, is there actually a case for us all tightening our belts, not splashing on the credit card and literally seeing what's in the piggy bank and spending cash instead?
Right. What we have to look at now is we're in a totally different world to 2010 when we had the austerity period. I mean, financial markets are in a completely different world. Back then, there was concerns that if you can't pay away as a country, that your debt as a country will be shunned and you'll pay a higher interest rate. Now, we've actually had so much quantitative easing, along with a number of other things.
Which is the Bank of England putting money into the system, or printing cash or something.
It is, but it meant that there was buyers for this debt. Now, I would actually go back to your point on this, which is there are ways out of this by going for growth. If you can make... Right now, the thing about the energy shock that we've got, we're all poorer. We're all poorer. The country is poorer. So the pie has shrunk. That always makes the politics extremely difficult. You've got to make it bigger, longer term. And we talk about, you asked about borrowing. They managed to borrow 400 billion over the last 2 years because of the health crisis. And I think what Gordon Brown is trying to get at here is we're in another crisis.
Right. But when we talk about growth, we've got the Bank of England saying quite specifically for at least a year, we are facing a recession, i.e. negative growth, the recession being 2 quarters of negative growth. So how do you get growth in an economy when everything comes to a grinding halt?
Well, you get in... Unfortunately, we're in the world of least worst options. There's a lot of things that are terrible that are happening, and it's difficult. And what comes as a government is you have to decide what to prioritise. Going back to Louise's point here on business.
It's confidence. Confidence drives the economy. And the worry with Andrew Bailey making this doom-mongering speech is that we're scaring people. We're scaring people
We're talking Britain
not
down?
spending. We're talking Britain down. Now, I've spoken to recently a couple of a certain age who are pulling in their reins. They're not going on holiday. They're not going out for meals. They can afford to. They say, oh, we're in a recession. We're from that time of austerity. You know, they're used to that when, you know, years gone by. No, we need these people to spend. It drives the economy. It supports our businesses. So we have to be really careful what we wish for.
Right. No doom-mongering.
No doom-mongering.
Right, I'm told off then. Thank you for the moment. This is On the Money with me, Mark Longhurst. We'll try and keep it positive. But after the break, hearing from an energy expert, do we need a tougher windfall tax? Could we even be heading for a return to 1970s-style energy rationing and a 3-day week? Stay with us. You're On the Money.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Very warm welcome back. You're On the Money with me, Mark Longhurst, sitting in for Liam. And at the top of the programme today, you may remember we were reflecting on Corporal Jones's famous line from Dad's Army, "Don't panic." But when both Gordon Brown and Liz Truss agree together, it may be time for an emergency budget. Well, should we be right to panic? And how should we panic? What should be in a budget to help on the pressing energy crisis? And crucially, how should we pay for any state help to bail out consumers? Well, actually, perhaps don't panic, because we have two experts in the studio who may be able to solve everything for us. And we're joined too on this by Malcolm Grimston, Senior Research Fellow at the Centre for Energy Policy and Tech at Imperial College. Helen and Louise still with us as well. But Malcolm, let me just touch on you, this issue we outlined at the top of the programme about the National Grid wargaming for the winter ahead. I understand it's something they do every year. But this year, as we said, they are playing the game for real.
Yes, as you would expect, they have to look at unlikely but possible events every year. Unfortunately, this year, the events that are extreme are maybe a little bit more likely than they were, say, a year or two ago. In terms of secure supplies, we don't use very much Russian gas or oil. We get most of our gas from our own reserves, particularly from the North Sea, and also from Norway. We may well find we have to pay more for it, but in terms of security of supply, it's not out of the question that we might be in difficulty, but we're probably going to be all right. But certainly the economics is a different thing.
But I did touch again on this point of 2017, where this huge sort of storage facility was mothballed effectively, with the government saying, well, it's a bit expensive to run and we've got diversity of supply, we don't need it. I mean, was that short-sighted?
Well, yes, I mean, there's always this tension with energy, that your decisions have very, very long horizons, but you're responding to short-term pressures, and particularly short-term political pressures. The storage facility, as you're saying, just off the Yorkshire coast, didn't look essential at that time because there was an awful lot of gas around. The UK was importing gas more than it had been as our reserves ran short, but Russia was pumping gas out. There was the fracking revolution in the States. The world seemed pretty much awash with natural gas. And in those circumstances, storage didn't seem so important. Now, only 5 years later, the world is revolutionised. And although, of course, the debate at the moment is what do we do about the short-term crisis this winter, I do hope the message will also be there that we've got to look at the long-term issue as well. Whether we go zero carbon or not, absolutely all of our electricity capacity that we're using in 2050 has not yet been built. And it's going to have to be built, and that's hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of billions of pounds of investment that are required.
Yeah, and we know how time and money-consuming nuclear plants are, for instance. But do you share the doom-mongers sort of warning about perhaps a return to a 3-day week and electricity being rationed and people being paid to turn off their gas and electricity?
It's possible. Ultimately, it's more likely that it'll be the economics rather than the actual physical supply. The 3-day week was caused because at that stage, we got 3/4 of our electricity from UK mined coal, and the coal miners went on strike. And so we lost the vast majority of our capacity very, very quickly. And indeed, in 1984, the great strike of that year, the government had spent 3 or 4 years preparing for that, building up coal stocks, so it could stand a long-term thing. Now, we're not in that situation today. We do have more diverse gas supplies, which look more secure. The Norwegians are never going to switch off their gas supplies to us, for example, although they may sell them at higher prices than they are at the moment. And our own North Sea reserves are pretty stable. So we're not in a precise parallel to the early 70s. But if things do get tight, then it will be industry which is asked to reduce its usage and demand first in order to protect domestic supplies into our homes.
Right. Malcolm, as ever, thank you for your expert analysis. Let's bring in our two expert guests here in the studio as well, Helen and Louise. You were talking, Louise, about growth and how important that will be in terms of getting things moving. I mean, this could be another problem if industry suddenly is told, look, you've got to start shutting down early or perhaps go to 4-day week, all these problems that we saw back in the 70s.
We can't do that. We can't panic. It doesn't help to panic anyway, does it? It doesn't help anyone. But to ask our businesses to go on a 4-day week and to ask people to work a 3-day week, we're already unproductive compared to other countries, the UK. We know that we need to address that. So it's reassuring to hear that the supply is secure. That's reassuring. So it would be an economic issue if we're asking our businesses to do that. But it would be...
Yeah, I think Malcolm just wanted to come back on a... He's still with us. You wanted to come back on a issue there, Malcolm.
I say, this business of panicking, it's getting the balance right between taking seriously these threats and responding to them in good time, which frankly we've not done in the past. I'm not a fan of panicking, but I'm also not a fan of overcomplacency. The challenges this winter are going to be really severe for people, mainly through cost. As I say, I'm hopeful that supplies won't be long-term affected. But it's obviously the case, the less we invest in our own supplies, the more we are dependent on countries like Russia, and the bigger the political weapon we give to those countries. If we see them, for example, in the dire situations that we are at the moment, I think energy has just not taken the high profile in political thinking that it deserves for a long time now.
Right.
And I'm very hopeful that this crisis will shake people up.
OK, well, but another warning not to panic. Getting the message. Malcolm, thanks for that. But let's talk about complacency as well, Helen, because there's a piece by Nick Timothy in the Telegraph today. Nick Timothy, of course, being former Chief of Staff or Joint Chief of Staff to Theresa May. And he's indicating that, that we really shouldn't be spending time on this leadership debate. We should be spending time on this issue of critical infrastructure and how we cope with the energy supplies and not return, sorry to go here again, to the failed economics and politics of austerity. Ouch.
Well, I mean, everyone has to have their opinion, but what I would say here is this point about a new world. It was already a new world post-pandemic. We were already living a more virtual life. I believe that is very much here to stay, working from home for people where they can. Obviously, that's not always possible in certain jobs.
Spending money on your smartphone instead of cash.
Well, exactly. And we were in a whole new world anyway. Now we have a war to deal with. I think the point when you're in a war is that what seemed impossible becomes possible, which is what Malcolm was driving at there.
Right.
So there's been, yes, countless times that governments have not been able to prepare for this. But look, I'm actually optimistic for the future, picking up on the optimism, because...
Tell us why.
I'll tell you what the world's going to look like in a decade. We're going to have better work-life balance because we can do more virtually.
Right.
We are going to have much more security of energy supplies, which is sensible, whoever and
because
however.
we've had this wake-up call.
Exactly, and on food supplies as well. And we will be, I believe, ultimately a more productive economy. Britain is good at services, at financial services. It's good at small business things. This is actually the new world where we can now export that globally.
So who best to steer us into this new world? Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak?
For me, Liz Truss.
Why?
Because she's being positive.
Right.
She's looking at investing in business by doing a U-turn on the corporation tax, which we just discussed. The outlook is, her focus is growth, growing our way out of this.
OK,
So.
Rishi or Liz?
Well, Rishi has been Chancellor.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Liz Truss has been Chief Secretary to the...
Treasury.
no
Yes,
less.
well, look...
She can't escape blame, can she?
No, she can't, but can I point out to you that whoever wins has a 71-seat working majority. They can get a lot done if they want to.
Good point. OK, stay with us. You're watching On the Money with me, Mark Longhurst. We're trying not to be doom-mongers, but coming up, we'll be talking about 2.4, even 3 billion litres of water wasted every day, all amid hosepipe bans on the way. First, though, Rosie with GP News headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 1:31. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. 3 people have been taken to hospital following a suspected gas explosion in South London. The terraced home collapsed after the blast. Neighbouring properties were also damaged. A 4th person's been treated at the scene. Neighbours said they'd helped rescue 3 children from the rubble, but they fear a 4th child may still be trapped. Around 50 homes have been damaged in flooding of up to 4 feet in North London after a water main burst. 4 people have been rescued, none of which were injured. Around 10 fire engines and 70 firefighters are on the scene in Islington to manage the situation. Thames Water have apologised to customers as some have no water or low pressure as a result. Well, there's increasing pressure on water companies to act quickly after water mains burst. Several companies have imposed temporary hosepipe bans as the Met Office predicts another heatwave will start this week with a prolonged period of dry weather. Downing Street's rejected a call by Gordon Brown to hold a Cobra meeting to address the cost of living. Boris Johnson's spokesman says the Prime Minister will be speaking to the Chancellor to ensure planned support remained on track, but that further plans are a matter for the next Prime Minister. Liz Truss wants immediate tax cuts and an emergency budget next month so that the national insurance hike can be scrapped. Well, writing in The Sun, the former Chancellor Rishi Sunak said Liz Truss's measures won't touch the sides in helping families tackle the cost of living and says dealing with rising prices has to come before cutting taxes. The former head of the UK Border Force has welcomed an apparent change in tactics by French police to try to stop migrants from crossing the Channel. Officers were photographed puncturing a small boat and smashing up the motor on a beach near Calais. More than 18,000 people have been intercepted by British authorities this year so far. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.211 and €1.188. The price of gold currently stands at £1,471 and 5 pence per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for real-time investment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back to On the Money with me, Mark Longhurst, in for Liam this week. And we are facing yet another week of scorching, well, perhaps up to 35 degrees of heat. Our parched gardens looking more like deserts every day. A hosepipe ban already imposed for customers of South East and parts of southern water companies. But they may be excused for scratching their heads at the latest revelations that there are exemptions for filling your hot tub, washing out your boat, or even turning a hose on your new lawn if it's less than 28 days old. They may also get a little more hot under the collar when being asked to bail out water companies nationally wasting its estimated 3 billion litres each day through leaking mains, when they promised to only half those leakage figures by 2050. Is it acceptable that a monopoly business paying huge salaries in a country with more annual rainfall than anywhere in Europe now appears to demonise the consumer for using such a scarce resource, warning us to shorten our showers? And then just this morning, huge mains leaks in Dartford in Kent and Islington in North London, literally flooding the streets and roads. Vehicles struggling to ford the surging torrent with their wheels nearly submerged. 4 feet of water, we're being told, in some parts of Islington. Well, let's bring in Anna Walker, now landlord of the Tollington pub in North London, being severely impacted by that flooding. Anna, thanks for taking the time to update us. What's happening there at the moment?
No problem. It's looking much better thanks to the local fire, police and the council. But from this morning, around 7 a.m, it was like a tsunami. The pipes burst and it was like being in Venice, if I'm honest. The water was flowing down the road. To be fair, they come out straight away, the Thames Water and the fire brigade, and we were just advised that there was a water leak. The streets, I mean, you can see now there's holes everywhere. Yeah, so that's pretty much how it is.
Yeah, I think they said there were 10 fire engines, 70 firefighters trying to cope with it all. Water 4 feet deep. I mean, what's it done to the pub? Presumably you've got a cellar there that's now underwater.
No, we were very lucky. Our cellar is raised, so it just missed our cellar. It came through our shed, but my husband had a broom and was sweeping it out as quick as it came in. Our member of staff that lives across the road was flooded, but ours is just cosmetic in the garden. We were very fortunate.
How do you feel about this? Because, as we've been saying, you know, we're all being warned that hosepipe bans are on the way. Don't shower, don't do this, don't do that. And then suddenly, as you say, you've got Islington being turned into Venice.
Yeah, it's terrible, but it's something that happened to do with the pipes. You know, it could have happened to anybody. I mean, I'm genuinely concerned about the hosepipe bans and stuff that are coming along, but no one could have foreseen this. The pipes are very old. It is an ongoing issue. We had a burst pipe a few weeks back just up the road, so it's something maybe that the area needs to address.
Yeah, I think they may get that message now, but I'm glad to hear that your cellar's OK and your pub's still up and running, but thanks very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us here on GB News. We wish you well there. Thanks very much. Anna at the Tollington Arms pub, coping with Venice in Islington. Nice thought, unless you're under the water. Joining us now, Peter Baker, who's Director of Smart Utilities Network at Arqiva, a high-tech water metering company. Thank you for joining us. Just looking at those pictures in Islington, I just wonder if it's the water companies and not the consumers that need these smart meters.
Yeah, good afternoon. Well, it's a mixture of everything because we are kind of in this all together, I suppose. There's an issue around obviously getting supply in terms of making sure we've got adequate water that we take from our rivers and our reservoirs. And then it's very much around making sure that we distribute it really efficiently, i.e. we don't lose a lot of that water along the way in it getting to the consumer. And then once we're on the consumer premises, it's again about looking at, well, does that water get leaked? You know, maybe say through a leaky loo or other type of device or a tap. And of course, it's about trying to help customers understand how they consume and use water as well, and potentially reduce their overall consumption. So metering, and smart metering particularly, provides the means to transmit data of how much water you're using from the supply side right through to the Thames Water Company or Anglian or whoever it might be.
Does it mean that the onus, as I say, is on the consumer, the customer at home, not on the public utility, the water company, who, you know, Victorian infrastructure where the water's leaking, as we've just seen in Islington, left, right and centre, and yet the technology is actually focused on the customer at home?
It's a combination of things. So around 25% or so of the water that is actually leaked throughout the entire network is on the consumer side. So that does mean 75% or so of it is leaked within the supply side from the water company. But it's really important that a meter is put in place so that you can assess how much water is actually being consumed, i.e. makes it to the house, and then how much is actually entering into a particular area from the supply side. And if you look at the difference, you can then assess how much water is actually being lost in the supply network and how much of it is actually being lost in the consumer side. So it really is a combination of both consumer and water company, but the majority is lost in the supply side, yes.
OK. And you think that every home in Britain should have this technology now, much as we're getting with electricity, smart meters, for instance?
Well, I think, in terms of smart metering, I don't set the policy or here at Arqiva, but what it does do, and if you put a meter in, it shows that the overall consumption reduces by about 16 to 18%, which is a combination of being able to identify leaks where they occur. And also, just the mere fact that you have a meter generally means that you're a bit more wary about what you're actually consuming.
Right.
And the really important thing is that a meter itself can identify if there's what's called a continuous flow of water, say at quiet times between, say, 1 and 5 a.m. And that would indicate that you might well have, say, a leaky loo. And a leaky loo loses about 120,000 litres or so. That's 1,200 bath loads every year.
Wow. OK, on that fairly staggering statistic, Peter, thank you very much for your time and joining us here on The Money. Let's turn back to our guest, Helen Louise. And have you got a leaky loo?
I hope I haven't got a leaky loo.
That's a lot of water, isn't it?
What's the betting that in about 3 weeks' time we'll have torrential rain here in the UK?
Well, we did touch on the fact, I don't know if you remember 1976, when Dennis Howe was made Minister for Drought by Jim Callaghan, and as soon as he was made Minister for Drought, the heavens opened and he had to be switched to be Minister for Floods. So who knows? Perhaps we ought to, in the new government, have a Minister for Drought.
We do.
But, I mean, there is a central question here as to whether it is the consumer, the customer at home, that bears the brunt of this, or whether it should be the utility tasked with giving us that water.
It feels like a lot of utility regulation is really due a massive overhaul because I feel like we've had decades of complaints about the way, you know, these monopolies are working. Of course, they're absolutely essential and, you know...
and they make money for shareholders.
They do, which is no bad thing, and you know,
a lot of pension funds and
nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But the most amazing statistic was in your intro when you said, what was it?
3 billion litres a day.
Only half the leaks be repaired.
By 2050.
By 2050, my goodness.
I mean, I guess the problem is a lot of the pipe work is underground, trying to find where the leak is and then getting to it and pulling up old Victorian clay pipes, wherever it might be, and reinstalling
This is where we're talking about the economy. You could, at this point, say, we are going to borrow a huge amount to invest in the infrastructure to get this done.
We've got poor infrastructure, haven't we? We do need to invest. I was out in the Cotswolds this weekend driving in the country lanes and this big torrent of water going across the road. So clearly that was a leak. There was nobody there. It was happening. I was thinking,
maybe it was coming from
should have got my bucket out and filled it up.
Yeah. Going upstream.
Put it on your garden.
Anyway, thank you for your not boosterism, that's the wrong word, but certainly say, look, don't panic. No, don't be too gloomy and let's stay positive. Thank you both for being with us today. But it is now time on The Money for our daily interview series, Money Talks. In this episode, Liam has been talking to Andy Scanlon, the UK franchisee of Sandbox VR. That's one of the world's leading virtual reality companies, providing fully immersive gaming in actual city centre locations and involving teams of players. It has its own unique titles such as Amber Sky 2088 and Deadwood Mansion, all designed in-house. While working as an investment analyst in Singapore, Andy visited a Sandbox VR venue and was so impressed he contacted the Hong Kong-based owner and eventually was granted distribution rights across the UK and the Republic of Ireland. Now, having launched the first venue in London back in July, he's now planning further centres in Manchester, Birmingham and Dublin in the coming months. Here's Andy Scanlon on The Money's latest interview for Money Talks.
Now, this particular business, your business here in the UK, when you went for a trip in Singapore, right?
I actually was living in Singapore at the time with my fiance. I'd moved out in start 2019. I was running a small investment advisory business out there and quite serendipitously stumbled into a Sandbox VR, and from that point, everything changed.
So this business existed in Singapore and you thought, I want to bring this to the UK because, of course, the UK is an absolutely huge leisure market and it's a bridgehead into Europe.
Arguably, the UK is one of the best leisure markets in the entire world. In fact, it has the second highest density of leisure venues per capita in the world. Brits, we love to go out, we love to spend time together, and we like to enjoy ourselves.
So tell us what the business is. What is it that you're selling here in your central London headquarters, a venue that's set to be replicated across the UK?
Well, Sandbox VR is the top class provider of the best virtual reality experiences you can do in the world. So our experiences are around 30 minutes long. You and up to five friends or family members can be transported to alien planets, to pirate ships, to zombie apocalypses. And together as a team, you've got to work together to overcome various challenges. Our technology is world class. There's no one really at our level at this moment.
What can people expect when they go into one of your virtual reality worlds? What do they think and feel? What do they experience?
Well, immersion and immersive experiences, I think, is a trend, especially in the consumer market, that's been growing over the last 5 years. And we offer, all of our technology offers the best immersive experience that can be shared amongst you and your friends. So what does that mean? So when our guests go into our virtual world, they'll all put on motion capture trackers, which will allow our computers and system to provide full body motion capture tracking. So as you move in the real world, your avatar or your virtual self will move in the exact same way. So you can see your friend behind you and high five them. And as your avatar touches their hand, you in the real world do it at the same time. And Sandbox was built on that principle. Virtual reality is best when it's shared with others. That, alongside haptic feedback, which is a vibration, so the virtual world can also interact with you directly, allows all of our guests to be completely immersed into whatever landscape we put them in.
Wow, that sounds amazing. I mean, how far can this go, this whole virtual reality thing? I mean, obviously, you know, Sandbox, you're saying, is at the cutting edge of where we are now. Mm-hmm. What are the limits to this technology?
We don't really know at the moment, and I think that's what's most exciting. I think there's so many avenues that virtual reality can explore. Most people, when they think of virtual reality, they think of the metaverse or films such as Ready Player One, where we'll all be at our own respective homes connecting into the digital world. But Sandbox VR is built on bringing people out of their homes into a common physical place for them then to be transported to the virtual world. And as we built one of the largest leisure venues in central London, that is our purpose that will be implemented across the UK.
So tell us about one of the specific kind of themes that your VR world offers.
Well, I would say shared immersive, but we've already discussed that. What we're really focused on is being able to provide a variety of virtual reality experiences for everyone, whether that's age, whether that's gender, whether that's preference of entertainment. And really, we see that in our customers. I mean, it is very, very mixed in terms of male to female, very mixed in terms of age. One surprising thing, in fact, is we've got more customers over the age of 35 than under the age of 25. And I think that's one of the clear demands from especially the British public, for a shared experience that's unlike anything they've ever done. Rather than getting on a plane to go to some off-distant lands, they can come to our venue and be transported to something that's fantastical and absolutely magical in nature.
But so just talk us through the kind of adventure, virtual reality adventure, a family could have if they came here to Sandbox in London or one of the other venues that you're planning to roll out across the UK.
So one of our most popular experiences is called Amber Sky 2088. So you are a team of droids. It's the year 2088. You're in New Hong Kong.
I'll still be around.
Well, we hope so. The planet is being invaded by aliens. You and your fellow droid warriors are going to be sent to one of our space elevators into space to protect the planet. It allows you to be constructive as a team. It allows you to cooperate as a team. It allows you to save the planet. And it's good family fun. It's good fun for everyone of every age.
So what sort of tasks do you have to achieve? What do you mean cooperate as a team? You're all sitting there with kind of headsets on, looking at a computer screen effectively, albeit a very sophisticated one. How do you save the world in that context?
So first and foremost, each of our rooms, which we call holodecks, are around 600 square feet. So you're not actually fixed. You're free roam. So you can wander around our space, which is a massive competitive advantage that we've got.
So this is a really physical experience.
It's very physical, which is why we've got a robotic bartender, why we've got beverages, because people come out and they've worked up a sweat and they need to be rewarded for saving the planet. So you get to move around. It's very active. Whilst it's very active, most people of any ability can do our virtual reality. So for example, in Amber Sky, half of you will be attackers, half of you will be defenders. The defenders will be provided with a shield used to protect the rest of their team. So you have to work and hide behind each other at particular moments, whilst the attackers ensure that the enemy doesn't get close. But as you go up each level towards space, you've got to protect your package, an explosive, which will help defeat the alien invaders up in space. It's mad. I mean, I've changed my life and pursued this because I just think that this is the future of entertainment. And entertainment hasn't had a real step change in much time, and I think it needs that.
You really have changed your life. You were working in asset management before. You're a smart guy. You studied economics and finance at university, and you walked into that Sandbox venue in Singapore. I mean, how instant was your conversion, if you like? How long did it take you to think, you know what? I'm going to convince the owners of this business that they need to entrust me, a relatively young man with all respect, to launch in a major market like the UK. Was it hard to convince them?
I think they recognise my passion for it. I mean, that first experience, after 30 minutes, I quite cinematically lifted up my headset and it just clicked. And in fact, I was with my now fiance girlfriend at the time, and two of her girlmates, and looked at them for kind of to see what I could recognise, and they were as enthused as I was. And we instantly went, like most Brits would say, let's go and have a beer and chat about it. So we went to a local hawker market out in Singapore and had some Tiger beers. And I sat across this table looking at my 3 female friends chat for 2 hours about this virtual reality experience. And I know them very well.
And they were psyched, as you say.
They've never spoken about one topic for more than 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And I just thought, this is something special.
Not too bad. Thanks a lot. You're looking well, by the way. Can I get your number?
All bartenders do that too. Anyway, Andy Scanlon, co-founder and CEO of Sandbox VR there, and a robotic bartender. Let's just remind you too, the full version of the interview on the Money Talks podcast on GB News YouTube channel or via the GB News app. Plenty of reaction to what we've been bringing you today. As ever, Helen has been in touch to say, back in the day when I bought my first house, inflation was 24%. So what's everyone complaining about? I just worked harder and longer. The trouble is today, people want something for nothing. Work is the way out. Another Helen saying, my electricity bill is normally £600 a quarter. I decided to turn off my washer, dryer, my fan oven and my dishwasher. I've just had my bill. It was £130. Result. Alan says, what a disgrace these MPs are. The country in a crisis with water shortages, energy bills, a struggling NHS, MPs ripping each other apart on breakfast television. It's a disgrace, he says. If they were running a business, they'd be bankrupt. Keep them coming. Always glad to hear what you think, especially if you're in Islington. Let's finish with taking you back to Islington-sur-Mer. As it was, not too bad at the moment, we're being told, but 7 o'clock this morning, the water mains burst there. 4 feet of water. Anna, the landlady at the Tollington Arms, telling us that it took some 70 firefighters and 10 fire engines to get things under control. But luckily her pub cellar wasn't flooded. Situation getting back to normal, we're being told, but just one of the water main bursts across the country as the water companies, of course, are preparing hosepipe bans for us. That's all for the moment. Don't forget to join us again tomorrow at 1 when we're continuing to focus on the cost of living crisis, helping you to beat the squeeze or the floods, whichever. This is GB News. I'm Mark Longhurst, and that was On the Money. Beverly's coming up next for you. Stay with us.
Hello, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update. It's all about the blue skies this week. If you're after rain, and then unless you live in the far northwest, you're not going to see much this week. It's all about the temperatures as well, rising further through the week thanks to this area of high pressure. It's been moving in through the weekend and it's going to stick around for most of this week. That exception will be that northwestern corner where this weather front will provide cloud and outbreaks of rain, certainly for the next day or so. Quite a damp day today over the Northern Highlands, the Western Isles and the Northern Isles. But elsewhere, yes, some patchy cloud, but most places seeing plenty of blue sky. And it is gradually just getting warmer day on day, widely into the low to mid-20s, maybe 28, 29 across the southeast. A little cooler on the eastern coast and obviously cooler with that thicker cloud and rain across the far north. May ease for a time over the highlands, the rain through the evening time, but then another area of rain pushing back into the highlands and the Western Isles through the early hours. Elsewhere, again, it stays dry and clear overnight. Not particularly warm nights with temperatures holding up in the teens in some locations, but the nights are also going to get warmer as the week goes on. During tomorrow, again, a lot of cloud across northern Scotland, maybe some patchy rain across Aberdeenshire early on, but that should ease off and then skies will brighten, but staying fairly cloudy over the Highlands, the Western Isles. Not as much rain here. maybe staying fairly damp across Shetland until quite late in the day. But otherwise, again, lots of blue sky and those temperatures a little bit higher, more widely into the mid-20s and possibly getting up to 30 Celsius across parts of the south. Again, some of the coasts, particularly the east coast, will be a little cooler with a bit more of a breeze coming in here. But staying fine and clear as we go through Tuesday night, and not a great deal of change really through the rest of this week with high pressure dominating. Look at that. Sunny skies for most through Wednesday, Thursday and Friday, and it is slowly going to get a bit hotter.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before.